place forever. I will thee trust and bear thy covert claim. For thou, O God, hast heard me, thou hast given the heritage of those that fear thy name. Hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. From the ends of the earth to thee I cry. When my heart's o'erwhelmed, lead me to the rock that's higher. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For thou hast been a safe shelter, a strong tower, from the fierce enemy that threatens sore. Thou wilt prolong life many generations. Kings subject thou canst save who thee implore. Hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. From the end of the earth to thee I cry. When my heart's o'erwhelmed, lead me to the rock that's higher. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. We'll observe the fermata in the last time through the last verse. We shall abide there before our God forever. Mercy and truth preserve our souls in Him. We shall sing praise unto His name forever. Daily perform our vows and laud His fame. Hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. From the end of the earth to thee I cry. When my heart's o'erwhelmed, lead me to the rock that's higher. Lead me to the rock that is higher than Well, good evening. Welcome to our evening service here. It was good to be here this morning. And I was thinking about Miss Lonnie's wedding here on Friday afternoon. The message bearer there said if you have a workhorse and you want him to endure through a long day's work, you feed him some oats, and that'll give him energy for the long haul. And I felt like this morning we got a good douse of oats, and we could go for a long time on the food that we got this morning. Thank you for that. I just have a few comments on the school here, Peckaway Christian School, and this is our Educational Focus Sunday, which has been good to be here this morning. Our theme verse there at school is, "The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life." It's taken from Proverbs chapter 14, verse 27. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life. And how is it that the fear of the Lord is a fountain of life? Wendell talked to us this morning about instilling biblical values within our children and doing so in the way we live. And I believe one of the ways we can do that is instilling within our children's lives a proper understanding of who God is and a proper fear of the Lord, or reverence for God. The rest of that verse, or the last portion of that verse, says, to depart from the snares of death. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of death. And so we can be assured that if we have a proper understanding of God and we have a reverence for God, and we instill that into our children, it will spare them from many harmful things later in life. Education is more than mathematics. It is also to instill a proper understanding of who God is. In education, you learn disciplines. Mathematics may be one way of learning a discipline. But the ultimate goal is to instill a proper understanding of who God is. So Peckway School is a church school. We are a Peckway School and Peckway Church are closely knit together. But there's more than Peckway School is represented there. I'm not sure where the count is right now, but I think there's around 12 churches that are represented there at Peckway. There's approximately 50 families, and this year we have 105 students enrolled. So as you can see, we've been building the addition, expanding. Over the last number of years, we've had smaller buildings we put in there. We put one little small building in, and then we needed a little more space, so we put a camper in there. So those are all gone now, thanks to John and others who helped with that. Now we have a little more room for doing the day-to-day things there at school. So I want to have board introductions here. Looks like, I believe most of the board is here. So I'm going to call out your name. If you could stand, and I'll give a little bit about where you are going to church and things as such. When I think about a board of directors at a school, I think about an engine room, as it were, in a ship. It is where the gears are grinding. It is where there is direction given to the school. And I feel privileged to have worked alongside of men on the board there who for many, many years have poured energy into the direction of the school, towards the grinding of those gears, towards the rudder, the directional thing that takes the ship across the water. Glendon Stoltzfus, if you could stand. Glendon is our board chairman this year. He's from the West Haven Congregation. John Byler, he serves as our board treasurer. He's from the Wellspring Mennonite Church, which is a offshoot of Spring Garden Church. Arlen Stoltzfus, he's also from West Haven, also serves there as pastor at West Haven. He serves as our board secretary. And Daniel Hirschberger. Many of you know Daniel. He's not here tonight, but he attends here. He's our maintenance rep there on the board as well. And then all of the Peckway Church pastors are also voting members on the board as well. All right, staff introductions. I think this year I'd like to have the staff come up front. It'd be a little easier to do that. And we want to have a special prayer for the staff. And again, I'd like to do introductions for that. So Paul is prepared to lead us in prayer. I'll do the introductions. And so if you all could make your way front here, and then I'll do introductions from there. Okay, So Doug Stolzfus is our incoming administrator. He's going to be taking my place serving there as administrator. James King is not here tonight. He's a 7th and 8th grade teacher. He is at year 5 and serving this year. Jared Zook, if you could raise your hand, Jared. He's our 5th and 6th grade teacher, and he's at year 4 teaching there. And he also does music for the entire school. So it's a blessing having Jared there at school teaching our children how to sing. Donovan Mast is our 4th grade teacher. Andrea Stolzfus is our 3rd grade teacher. And Caitlin Musser is not here tonight. She will be our 2nd grade teacher. And Jen Stolzfus is our 1st grade teacher. Brianna here now. Brianna is a PCA here at Peckway. She serves as a personal care assistant. So we have a special needs child in school, and she is assigned to teach her academics along with taking care of her. She needs some extra assistance in getting around, so she helps her with that. Chrissy Ann Peachy. She's going to be resource room this year. Derek Stolzfus is resource room and teacher's assistant. This is Derek's 2nd year there. And Kelsey Stolzfus is secretary. So it's a privilege. Thank you, staff. I can say, after having taught there 1 year of Bible class, being part-time teacher, my respect for young men and ladies like this has grown tremendously. We are grateful for our staff here, and thank you for committing yourself to teaching our children. Lord bless you. So Paul, if you could come.
Yeah, I too just want to echo what Manny said and just thank you, teachers, for your commitment to teaching again this year. Those of you that maybe have done it a few years know what you're getting into a little bit, and the newer ones, the board is here behind you, so we appreciate your commitment. We just want to spend a little bit of time in prayer. Why don't we stand as we pray? And if we could have maybe 3 men from the congregation just pray, and then I'll close and also have a prayer for Wendell as he shares this evening. So we just have 3 men. Go ahead and pray, and then I'll close.
Father, we just want to thank you for young women and men and older men that have invested in our schools, in teaching our children. Father, right now, I'm just going to ask that you've told us, like Wendell said, that we need to ask. And I'm just going to ask you, Lord, to give each one of these teachers wisdom as they teach the children. When they come to situations they're not sure what to do, Lord, then you will give them wisdom. Father, I'm just reminding you, and which you will. So bless them. Amen.
Thank you, Lord, for the privilege of being able to have our school in this country. Thank you for your word, and thank you for the direction that was given in your word concerning education in schools. And so we pray that our schools would model your word, and we would be able to have a school that teaches character and values even beyond the academics. We pray that you would bless the teachers with much wisdom, with patience, with love, with creativity to be able to do well, and the students in their classes respond well to Jesus' name.
Father, thank you for this group of people that are willing to serve in education here at Peckway. And Father, we just pray a blessing on them. We pray for protection for them physically, spiritually, and mentally as they serve. Father, give them energy and passion for this, even greater than one can come up with on their own. But Father, that also, as others mentioned, that you would give them wisdom from above and grace, and may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We ask this in Jesus' name.
God, I too thank you for this group of teachers. I ask your blessing upon them as they prepare for school the next few weeks and as they teach. Thank you too for the members on the board and their willingness to serve in that capacity. God, I pray you would continue to give wisdom and direction. I pray too for those represented in the church here that do homeschooling, the ones that teach their children these academics and things at home. I pray your blessing with those mothers and fathers as they spend that time teaching as well. And I pray for the students as they come to school here again to learn this year. I just pray your blessing. I pray that things would move smoothly. And I pray for our service now this evening. I pray for Wendell as he shares again what you have laid on his heart. I pray you would help us to be attentive. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated. You can have your seats. So we have Wendell Glick with us again this evening. He was here with us this morning and really enjoyed the morning. And just maybe for a little bit of interest, Wendell was my 5th grade teacher. So sitting here this morning, I told him it felt kind of like I was in 5th grade, hearing him read that story, and it just reminded me of story time and a lot of things about Wendell that I appreciate. So, Wendell.
Thank you, Paul, for that introduction. And yes, it's good to be in the presence of some of my students. I see Glendon is here, and there's probably some I've missed, but maybe not. I'm not sure where they all go. You know, one of the things recently I was, not recently, currently I'm building an addition to our house, and I had never laid block before. I don't know, is Ben here tonight? Yeah, he's here, but he doesn't have to care about this. But I did. I started laying block, and I enjoyed it. It was good to have done it. You know, there are certain things in life. One thing I would like to be someday is a returned astronaut. Like, I would like to have done it. And that's sort of how I feel about laying block. I'm glad to have done it. But where I'm going with this, what was so rewarding about that work, and it was kind of unexpected for me, but just it took me a couple weeks to lay 450 block, which that's about right for you guys, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, a couple of weeks and I had it done, and I did some other things too. But what was so immensely gratifying about that work was that at the end of I would say the day, but it's more like the end of the 2-hour, 1 wheelbarrow full of mud shift, and then I was done for the day. At the end of that, I could see the wall was bigger. I'd got something done. And I'd come out the next morning, it was still that big, and then I would put another wheelbarrow load of mud through and put some more block in, and it was bigger. And it was just gratifying to see this wall get bigger. Now we switch to the teachers. That's not the nature of your work. It might be 20 years. It might be 30 years, 40 years. It might be never that you see the results of some of your work. I just name that for what it is. Well, I didn't name it. I just described it. That can be difficult. That's hard work when the fruit may be even beyond your lifetime. And so to the teachers who are standing up here, I commend you to the work. To a work where sometimes you will go to work. And you know this. I'm speaking to a few veterans and maybe a few rookies, I'm not sure. And it actually feels like the wall fell down a bit. It got smaller. That's discouraging work. But the joy, God is faithful. And over the years, I simply bless you in your work and trust that God will provide the increase. This morning, the focus was on informal education, not informal as not being important, but informal as not being in an academy of some kind, a physical school or homeschool or something like that. And our need for wisdom as adults, as teachers. Tonight, we switch to the formal education of our children in school. Now, one thing that I should say up front is that I have a lot of opinions about things. They're good opinions. I saw a t-shirt once for sale. It said, "Everybody is entitled to my own opinion." And I don't believe that, but if it starts to feel that way, just understand that sometimes I have opinions about things, and then people ask me to talk about education, and if I have opinions about education, I will share them. Some of what I'm talking about tonight is musings that are possibly not time-tested enough to be fully understood by me, which means maybe I shouldn't say a lot about them, but I trust that you can receive some of these thoughts in the spirit in which they are given. I want to begin by describing a model of education, and I will acknowledge right up front that what I'm doing now, I run the risk of being reductionistic, of describing something complex in a short time, and there will be gaps, there will be things missed. I can't bring to bear, I don't even know all of the things that come to bear on this topic, but some of it will be missed. But I'm speaking in a bit of a general sweep about the model of state-directed schools in many parts of the United States, the roots of the model in the early 19th century, so we're talking 200 years ago. Now, a significant shift that happens in the 19th century in the Western world, Western Europe, and it expands to United States, to Canada, other countries as well. A significant thing to note about that time period is the hugely transformational shift that we describe as the Industrial Revolution. This is the time of invention, of progress, of the cotton gin, of the steam engine, there's usually three things. What's the other one? The spinning jenny, or is that the same as the cotton gin? I'm not sure. It's been a little while since grade 7 social studies, or whatever year that was. I don't remember. That's the sad thing. I don't remember. I remember that I learned something. That's good. Invention, but a big shift in this time. So you think about labor and work before the Industrial Revolution, and the value of a person's work is the product of their labor, whether it's a certain amount of cows that got milked, or a certain amount of acres that got harvested, or whatever. Market forces, various things come to bear on this, and you get a value for your work. It could vary depending on the bartering of the day or whatever. In the Industrial Revolution, with the onset of factory work, things are shifting now so that a man is paid a certain amount, not by how much he gets done, but by how long he works. He starts to get paid by the hour. This means you start at a certain time and you end at a certain time, not because you're done, but because it's quitting time. That's a different, farmers know that quitting time, you have 50 cows and it's not going so well, and you got like the 45th one, and you're like, well, it's quitting time. It's not quitting time. Until, I think I'm right about this. I've never been a dairy farmer, but I'm pretty sure quitting time is after the 50th one, and even a little later, because there's other things to do. But the shift to a certain amount of being paid by the hour. And so, in the 1840s, Horace Mann, who was the secretary of the Massachusetts Board of Education, traveled to Europe to study the Prussian model of public education. And Alvin Toffler describes this school in his 1970 book, Future Shock. And he writes, "Mass education was the ingenious machine constructed by industrialism to produce the kind of adults it needed. The problem was inordinately complex: how to pre-adapt children for a new world, a world of repetitive indoor toil, smoke, noise, machines, crowded living conditions, collective discipline, a world in which time was to be regulated not by the cycle of the sun and the moon, but by the factory whistle and the clock. The solution was an educational system that, in its very structure, simulated this new world. This system did not emerge instantly. Even today, it retains throwback elements from the pre-industrial society, yet the whole idea of assembling masses of students to be processed by teachers in a centrally located school was a stroke of industrial genius. The whole administrative hierarchy of education followed the model of industrial bureaucracy. The very organization of knowledge into permanent disciplines was grounded on industrial assumptions. Children marched from place to place and sat in assigned stations. Bells rang to announce changes of time. The inner life of the school thus became an anticipatory mirror, a perfect introduction to industrial society. The most criticized features of education today, the regimentation, lack of individualization, the rigid systems of seating, grouping, grading, and marking, and the role of the teacher, are precisely those that made mass public education so effective an instrument of adaptation for its place and time." End of quote. Now that's a little chilly reading that. It gives you a bit of the spider sense going up, like what's happening here, what's going on, how did we get to this place where we look at school in the way that we often do. One of the concepts I mentioned this morning that comes out in Scripture is that of priority, that there is an order to things. Certain things come before other things. The way I want it to be heard tonight, because I can be misunderstood, the meaning I wish to make tonight is not that schools shouldn't have bells. It's not that math periods shouldn't have a starting and ending time, or that children should never walk in single file, although I think that shouldn't happen very often. It's not that those things should not exist, but it's a call to check our ordering, to check our priorities. How many of you think you could probably, without too much difficulty and maybe a Fisher book, trace your lineage to Switzerland or Germany without too much trouble? Raise your hand. Okay. Somewhere across the pond. We consider ourselves to be of German stock. Now, what do you know about German stock? Germans are, well, what are they famous for? Talk to me. Some brands or some ideas or for
Self-sustaining.
Pardon? Self-sustaining. Mercedes. Volkswagen. A precision engineering with a determined work ethic. Man against the world, the Übermensch, the guy that's just, he's stoic and he's gonna take it on and he's gonna get it done. That was a bit reductionistic, I understand that, but you hear what I'm saying a little bit. This is in our, it's for many of us, this is in our ancestral memory, it's in our DNA to operate this way. Let's look for the primary scripture passage tonight at Matthew chapter 18. I wish to read about 10 verses from Matthew 18. Matthew 18, verse 1. At the same time came the disciples unto Jesus, saying, Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child unto him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoso shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe unto the world because of offenses! Jesus describes your hand or foot offending you and your eye and plucking it out. And we skip to verse 10. Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. I've for some time been wondering what Jesus meant in verse 3. When he says, unless you turn, unless you convert and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Commentators disagree on what he meant. Was he talking about literal children? Or was he talking more metaphorically about perhaps another aspect of the new birth experience? Regardless, it's worth looking at Jesus' treatment of children. There's not much in Scripture about Jesus as a child. Not much is said about him. History goes silent for those 12 years or so until Jesus went to Jerusalem and got lost. He wasn't lost, but they couldn't find him. Didn't you know I'm doing my Father's business? That's that brief story that we read in Luke. But the gospel accounts are silent on Jesus' life until he begins his public ministry when he's around 30 years old. But we do see in the ministry of Jesus his posture toward children. In the well-known story of mothers bringing their children to Jesus, and the disciples trying to block them out and saying, don't bother him. And Jesus says, let them come. Allow them. Suffer them, in the King James, to come. Permit them to come. Because these children, and he was talking, I'm confident in that situation, about literal breathing children. Let them come to me because the kingdom of heaven looks like them. Now that's a little hard for me to take as an adult. See, I was a child. When I was a child, I thought as a child, When I became a man, I put away childish things, and there's actually a double meaning there. Every time we pick up the toys, I think about that verse. So I have come, a good ways from when I was 3 years old. Surely, my maturity, my understanding of the world, my perception of human existence and the meaning of life and all of the important questions is in orders of magnitude higher than it was when I was 3. Surely one would hope for that at least. Let it be, dear Lord. Jesus says to me, the kingdom of heaven doesn't look like a 46-year-old teacher who has some better sense of the meaning of life than a 3-year-old. The kingdom of heaven looks like a 3-year-old. What does this mean? It's helpful to me to differentiate between childish When I became a man, I put away childish things and childlike. Jesus said, become like a child. Childlike is generally a positive or at least neutral. Childish, not so much. Childish has negative connotations. The qualities of a child in a person who is no longer a child and therefore should know better. Silliness, lack of maturity. We could describe an adult as having a childish rant or selfish and childish behavior. But childlike entered our language later, and it usually connotes some positive quality like innocence, trustfulness. We talk about a childlike delight in mud, a sense of childlike wonder. And notice that even with the word childlike, we're thinking of words like delight and wonder. And with childish, we're thinking of words like selfish and tantrum and these kinds of words. So the main difference between childlikeness and childishness is that childlikeness, I guess, is the parts of children that are good, and childishness is the parts that are bad because they're no longer appropriate for the current age level. Not all qualities of childhood are childlike. There are things we should grow out of. But what is it about a child that mirrors what the kingdom of heaven looks like? It would be worth to take a little detour sometime to explore what Jesus meant when he even talked about kingdom of heaven. I believe there's a sense of the now, but not yet aspect of it. Jesus said the kingdom of God is within you, it's among you, it's at hand, it's at your fingertips. So whatever was meant by it, it certainly does not, it is not limited to simply a life after death sort of thing. It comes into now. The kingdom of heaven punctures this space-time continuum through members of the kingdom of heaven who are regenerate, who are born again, who bring one person at a time, one act at a time, let God's will be done on earth as it is already established in heaven. So when Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like these children, he's talking about something contemporary, something today. There's something now, not entirely or only in the future. And so we consider, well, what is it about children? What do they have that I need? Now we get into the more of the research area of things now, and admitting that there is variation in how research can be done and that results are not always bulletproof. Still, studies and tests typically conclude that a child, by the time they are about 10 or 12 years old, so we're talking about grade 4, 5 into 6, have lost a significant portion of their imagination, of their creativity, of their spontaneity, of their innocence, of their whimsy, that a lot of it is gone by grade 5-ish, 4, 5, 6. Now we could say, well, that's just the course of life. You can't make a lot of money being whimsical. And eventually, this child is going to have to make a lot of money. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot, but they should stay alive and support their family, and that's important. And I get that. The concern I have is that in our sense of who we are as adults, of what we know, of the troubles we've seen, that we push down upon our children too soon. And I mean too soon in their development. That they do not, that part of the reason that the childlike qualities are lost is because we're not making space for them, because we're pushing them out, because we know better, because we don't believe in Santa Claus. Now, I don't think they should believe in Santa Claus either. I hope you know what I mean by that statement. There's a knowing, an understanding that adults have that can be dismissive and push down on some of the best characteristics of our children. And Jesus is asking us to look at our children and be taught by them. How might we offend? Consider creativity. One study I encountered did a test on children that measured their creativity through various activities and so forth. And in the about age 5 category, more than 90% of the children were geniuses at being creative and create just they were boundless in their options. Whether it's, in building something out of blocks, limitations didn't matter. I have a friend whose mom didn't let him mix, Tinker Toys and Legos, I think, because they were, they had to be like in separate boxes in the storage container, and if you would mix them up, that would be a pain, right? Because it would be less orderly if the Tinker Toys and the Lego blocks got mixed up. So the solution to keeping the Tinker Toys and the Lego blocks from getting mixed up is to say to your child, you can choose one at a time. That's an adult imposition upon a child's imagination, because there are so many toys that go well together. H.O. Gage electric train sets and Lego blocks. That's perfect. I mean, you can build stuff and your train goes around and in tunnels and so forth, and it's just delightful. Or you can use the Duplo blocks and the Lego blocks, like the regular ones. They mix together really nicely. They actually build together. I'm suggesting that our adultness, our desire for order, our desire for precision, our desire for economy of time and space and beauty that we think is important is at times pushing out something in our children that I think matters, something that's important. Now, should we teach orderliness? Yes. Should we teach punctuality? Yes. Let us tend to the rate and the age level at which we do it, how we introduce adulthood to a child. I used to think that this thing of offending and needing a millstone hanged about your neck and thrown in the sea was like heinous crimes, sexual assault or physical violence or just like, and certainly that's included. But I also suggest that when we minimize the appropriate humanity of children, including creativity, but extensions of creative thinking, empathy, imagination, and so forth, that we run the risk of giving them offense. Consider some characteristics of healthy children, characteristics of simplicity, of being uncomplicated. G.K. Chesterton writes about this, if I can find the right place in my notes for that. A child kicks his legs rhythmically through excess, not absence of life. Because the children have abounding vitality, because they are in spirit fierce and free, therefore they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, do it again, and the grown-up person does it again until he is nearly dead. For grown-up people are not strong enough to endure to exalt in monotony. But perhaps God is strong enough to exalt in monotony. It is possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun, and every evening, do it again to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes every daisy separately but has never got tired of making them. It may be that he has the eternal appetite of infancy, for we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we. Children have the characteristic of simplicity. They have the characteristic of trust, a firm belief in the reliability, in the truth, or the ability of someone or something. It's why children believe in Santa Claus, because they are trusting. There's creativity, inventiveness, curiosity. Curiosity can be good, it can be bad. There is courage. Children have a way to dig down and be courageous. Children are resilient. Children can have grit. Children can be intuitive, to understand something instinctively without consciously reasoning it out. They can get it. They will intuit if they are loved, regardless of words that are used to describe their level of receiving love from a parent. Children can figure it out. They can sniff out pretense and falsehood. They're whimsical. They can be spontaneous, doing things as a result of a sudden impulse without premeditation. Try this sometime with your wife. It might work. It might not. There are aspects of spontaneity. It's date night tonight. Well, did you get a sitter? Well, no, I was just being spontaneous. All right, that's done. But children have this. They have the aspects of spontaneity, of empathy, and I make no mistake. I understand that foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. The Proverbs writer is clear that we are born with a bent to be selfish. But what I have found in children over and over again, what I have seen in them, is the capacity to care for each other, the capacity to be content, to use their imagination, to form new ideas, images, concepts. And I believe, as a creative artist, that creativity, and I pick on this one because I notice that creativity is the singularly most noticeable thing that separates humans from animals. Animals might be economical, they might be clever, they certainly are self-protective for the most part. Some of them are not. But humans make stuff that they wouldn't have to make to survive. They make stuff just to make the world better. Well, we say birds sing. Did you know that birds actually, when they're singing, I understand this from scientists anyway, that birds are mostly having arguments, mostly territorial, a lot of jurisdiction issues in birds. And we hear this, oh, listen to the beautiful song. They're just arguing. I don't know. I can't prove that. But that's what I've read. Humans, we make music for just a vast range of reasons. Consider David in the Psalms, and consider that most of the Psalms were sung. And what range of human expression, from the joy and the sorrow, from lament, from smash their teeth with gravel. Have you read that verse? Look it up sometime. Break their teeth with stones, God, because they're nasty. Just that range of feeling and of sorrow and of joy that comes out, and we sing this, we make music. Creativity separates, it elevates, and why not? It should be that way, because humans are made in the image of God. And the first record that we have of anything God did, Genesis 1:1, God created. It's the first verb ascribed to God. He made stuff. Now, we are sub-creators. We can't make something out of nothing. But we still understand the idea of creativity, of making things as significant, as important. Children are diverse. Children are human organisms. They are created in God's image. But God's image, if we cast our gaze over the globe, God's image is enormously diverse. But we can even just bring it down to this room, these four walls, and we look at all the children scattered in amongst us here. And the diversity of personality, the diversity of spirit, of a multitude of aspects. They're so different. The challenge for the school teacher what system, what single way of doing it can be best for all of them? It's hard enough being a parent. We have 4 children. We were actually really good at it too, by the way, raising children. We had 3, and then God gave us a 4th one to teach us that we actually weren't that good at it. I don't think she's listening. They're so different. They teach you so much. And that's the challenge of an education system. The challenge of formal education that I lay out tonight is basic. It is uncomplicated, and that is that every child is different. What are you going to do? Teachers, you're going to have 10, 12, 14, I don't know, what's your biggest classroom this year? 7th and 8th graders, how many are there? 15? 20? I don't know, let's go with 15, no one seems to know. They're all different. They have different learning styles, they have different learning needs. Some of the boys in grade 8, by the time May comes around, and the windows are, do you have air conditioning? The windows are open, and the farmers are doing first cutting of hay, and stuff is going on. They want to be out there. It's torture to be an 8th grade boy in May if you want to be cutting hay. For another 8th grade boy in May, it might be just fine. Maybe pre-algebra is just the thing. But there's such a wide range. That is the challenge. And so we consider the model of education that I described earlier. And this model is to produce a certain kind of worker. A worker who shows up at starting time. When the bell rings, they start working, and they stop when the bell rings, they take a break. The bell rings, they work some more. They stop when the bell rings, and they have some lunch. And some work time during the day, they get some things done, and the bell rings, and they go home. Preparing children for that was successfully done in the 19th century Prussian model of education. But let's come back to our values. What are our values? Our values align with our community, with bringing out as much as we can in every child, encouraging their potential to be kingdom workers, to be church builders, to be prayer warriors, to be humble, articulate men and women who can engage with society, who can by their life present a testimony that they belong to God, that Jesus is Lord of their life. These are our priorities. What happened in the United States in the late 19th century? In 1870 or so, public education was common in the U.S. This is about 40 years after man went to study the Prussian model, but it was not uniform. There were different times, different subjects, etc. Some said this is a problem. And in 1892, a committee of 10 at Harvard met to determine what should happen in the years of school. They decided we need 12 years. That's a 12. We need 12 years of compulsory education. Certain subjects come in certain years. It led to a public standardization. If you hire a graduate, you will know that they did this in this year, and this in this year, and that in that year, and that they passed, and that passing was a certain much. And there's a standardization. we start to see in the course of American history, in the invention of the steam locomotive and the train schedules, in the establishment of universal time, because time used to vary from town to town. It would depend on the church clock and what it was set to. And so you might get on a train and you would think it was this time, but you got there, nope, it's that time, and you adjust your watch a bit, and this did not work for the Industrial Revolution, for times when you had to be at meetings, for times when work had to go this much, and so the standard time was developed. And in travel, started to emerge three concepts: reliability, regularity, and predictability. So reliability says the ships and the trains depart and arrive at certain times. Regularity, they follow the same pattern at the same times, they go through the same stations, they leave certain days of the week. And predictability, it takes the same amount of time to do it each day. This is great for industrial society. This is great for efficiency, for German way of getting it done, or Prussian, I guess, at the time. But we have taken, and this is, I guess, my primary thing tonight, is that there is a way of doing school that is orderly, that is God-honoring, that has expectations for children that are, I trust, appropriate for their development at certain levels in their life. That's important. It's necessary. We look for a school system where children with developmental needs, whether obvious or not, find a way to grow, find a way to belong, where students who are academically just get everything done, nothing is hard for them, still find some challenge somewhere in the school. We strive for that. We want it. We want to meet all of our children. Everybody in this room wants our children to go to school and have a good experience. It doesn't have to be an easy one, but we want it to be one that they look back on and say, this was good for me. My life is better because I did this. Going to the order, to the priority. I mean, think about punctuality. Did you know? I mean, it's something I've heard it all my life. Be punctual. If you can't be on time, be early. If you are late for a meeting, you're stealing time from the people that you're meeting with. Fair. True. Is punctuality a good look for a Christian? What do you think? I think so. Yes. It is also very culturally informed. Have you been to Latin America? Have you studied the difference between cold culture, warm culture? It's more complicated than that. But there are cultures where you go to them and people are not punctual. They don't show up. Or they show up eventually, but there's a shift in values. They value something else. I remember Jonas Sauter telling the story of being in Haiti, and he was lost or something, and it apparently wasn't as violent a time as now because you wouldn't want to do that now. But so the party that he was with, they stopped and asked a young fellow along the road for directions. The young fellow gave them some directions, and they were starting to go on their way, and this young fellow was offended because they had just gotten something from him, and he wasn't getting anything back. And it wasn't even money. It was just, talk to me. What's going on? Some kind of relationship here, like we're humans. And you wanted to know where to go, and I told you, now you're gone. There was some offense there. Different ways of thinking about it. Where I'm going with this is that, have you ever noticed that punctuality is actually not really highlighted in scripture texts at all? I mean, the Middle Eastern culture is a warm culture. The Good Samaritan, if the Good Samaritan cared about punctuality, he would not have stopped. It's hard. I mean, you've seen people along the side of the road and you think they might have a flat tire, but you're like, well, they've got a phone. They'll call somebody. They probably have AAA. Pretty sure they have AAA. Just because they don't have a sticker in their car, they probably just don't want to put the sticker on because it's kind of ugly. And we go on because most of the time when we're on the road, we really need to be somewhere soon. So the value of punctuality, it's a good thing, but keep it in its proper place. I'm using that as one example because our sense of how a school should run, our sense of the bells, and come in by this time and go out by that time, and we have 45 minutes to write this essay, and it's the end of 45 minutes, and somebody says, I'm not done my essay. Well, you had 45 minutes, just like the rest. People learn differently. I remember a student, it wasn't you, Glendon, or you, Paul, but anyway, it took a while to get going on a writing assignment. It was the priming part was difficult. And it could take a long time, half hour. But after it got going, then it could flow, but then the period was over. And then they were behind. And then it was time for the next thing, but they weren't done. And they could have got done if they had had more time, but it was the next thing. It was, I don't know, was it lunchtime? Was it recess? Was the school day done and it was time for me to have a break? This imposition of this grid that we lay on our students, notice it. Teachers, notice it. Be aware of your children and think about how can I add an appropriate amount of flex, an appropriate amount of space into my day. I don't know how tightly you make your schedule at Peckway. I've seen schools, mostly high schools, where they do their schedules and they're down to the minute. Like a period will start at 10:47 and end at 11:23 or something like that. And it is my deeply held conviction that if you're scheduling your school schedule to the minute, that you are putting too much in a day. Something's got to go. There's got to be some relief. I mean, that kind of desperation, to just wring out the last drop of the lemon. It's just. Okay, I don't have any more words. Anyway, I hope you maybe you do that. Sorry, I didn't ask ahead of time. Maybe it's fine. It might be just fine. But be aware of those strictures and what they do. So what I'm talking about tonight is that the order of things. We need a model. We need a way of doing things. Even though children are all different, we still have to have a school day get done. We still have to be, relatively done by the end of the year. Remember the priority, though. And the priority is between children and the system. I say the system with a bit of a sinister sound because it's, I've been portraying it in a industrial revolution, smoke factory kind of light. But you have the children and you have the system by which your children are formally educated. Don't try to balance them. Make no mistake in your attitude, in your posture toward the school, in the way you think about things, in the decisions you make as a teacher, in the decisions you make as a board. There is an ordering, and the children are first. The system serves the children, not the other way around. The system, and it can, again, applying the wisdom that God can give us. There are hard decisions to make. I'm not going to rose-colored glasses this thing. I've been in education long enough to know that even if you had just 2 students in your class, there would be certain conflicts. There would be things that would be difficult to work through. Even so much more with 15 or 20 children in your class. But mind the spirit. I know from experience that you get into a habit and you do things and you set your sights on a certain part of your day, you want to be at a certain place, or a certain part of the week, you want to be at a certain place, and the students aren't quite there. Some of them are coming. You can kind of pick out the ones that justify your lesson plan and your speed of going through things. But be aware, notice if you're bringing your class with you. I mentioned punctuality. Order, cleanliness, these things are important. Cleanliness might be next to godliness, I don't know, but it's not higher than it, and it's not more important than our children. There are some times when you just might have to have your desk a little messier than you would like. I heard of a teacher, actually Melvin Lehman tells this story. He worked underneath another teacher who was like a perfectionist in order and precision. And I believe Melvin borrowed his pitch pipe, which he kept in his desk. And he knew that this teacher was like really picky about stuff. So he borrowed the pitch pipe and he used it and he put it back right where it was. I mean, he remembered. He put it back. And the next day the teacher mentioned it. He said, did you use my pitch pipe? Yeah, well, how did you know? Well, he put it back. He didn't have C at the right place. It was like turned inside the case. He also didn't have the wheels on the desk chair when he put it away all parallel. Now, that's not super hard to do. You just have to back it up and then go in and don't wiggle. Then you got it. You don't actually have to get down on the floor and turn it, but he hadn't. They were just a little shrakes, just not quite there. I remember at Fairhaven one time I was taking some computers apart and trying to figure out some things that was behind my desk. And so there was like monitors and CPUs were open and cables. But it was time to go home. And I was like, I'll clean it up tomorrow. And so I went home. Middle of the night, 1:30 in the morning, got a phone call. It's from the board member who was calling to let me know that once again Fairhaven had been broken into. It was kind of a regular thing there. People would bust into the school. And there was a policeman there, and he was in my room, and they were pretty sure that my room had got hit pretty hard. And so I went to talk about what had been done, and it looked just like I had left it, which was pretty embarrassing. So maybe I could have been more clean there. But Jesus, what does Jesus say? We think about the future. When we're adults, it's what we do. We think about, what's way down the road. Jesus says, consider the lilies. Become childlike. Take no thought for your life. And yes, there's value in teaching our children to, for example, delay gratification. But be aware that there are aspects to Christian living, aspects to Christ-likeness that will require us to suspend our schedule. Brother Floyd, you will probably remember the Menocoons-ism. He would pray this. He would say a lot of things, like singing in the key of M. He was my principal at Calvary Bible School. But he would also say, I would hear it in his prayers. He would say, Lord, you know we have a schedule, and we know you have the perfect right to interrupt our schedules. That was his attitude, and it was a good one. Take that with you, because I assure you that the Lord is planning to interrupt your schedule. He's got a lot of things lined up, and some of them involve like children throwing up and stuff like that. Like it's coming. You can expect it. So it's my opinion that the reliability, the regularity, the predictability, the efficiency, the let's bail it in tight, let's teach as much as we can, and if there's a little slot, let's fill something in there. These have been forced into being top-order Christian virtues, when in fact, they can be dehumanizing on a child level. They can certainly marginalize imagination and creativity. So I'm simply making a call to be careful, to notice it, to notice if your obsession with order might be going too far. I don't know if it is, but consider that. So my premise tonight is that Jesus calls us to become like a child, to participate in God's kingdom, that children are diverse. They generally display high levels of imaginative, divergent thinking, which is a quality necessary for creativity and empathy. God is the creator. We are created in his image as sub-creators. And when children lose, if a human loses their creativity over time, whether by just the flow of life and getting old or by the imposition of adults pushing down on them, This is a loss of a part of our humanity. This is making us less. I shouldn't say it this way, but kind of. It makes us less in the image of God when our creativity goes away. I'm not sure about that. Is that true? Well, we're made in God's image. We should notice areas when our way of doing school contributes to the suppression of a child's childlikeness, and consider how we can be a part of reversing this. So notice your habits, notice your priorities, notice your systems and your policies, and understand that our children are of much greater value than our models, our schedules, and our curriculum. Children are also the single biggest untapped resource in education. Ask them for ideas. Take cues to some extent from them, because they can give you good ideas. Many students think school is boring. Some do anyway. It's repetitive. I don't get why we need to do this stuff. That's the children saying, give me a reason to care. So think about it. Why should they care? Why should the Pythagorean theorem, for example, I just wanted to say Pythagorean. Why should they care? Is there a reason that they should? Find one. You might hear children say, I don't have a choice in anything I do. I don't even have a choice of when I get to go to the bathroom. What a child is saying in that time is I have a brain. I can do something. Trust me with something. Trust should be earned, but give them a chance to earn it. Let children be creative. Let them surprise you with what their passions are. Ask them what they care about. In my teaching experience, grade 5 and 6 students wanted more story time. We'd always quit story time. We had 15 minutes a day for story time. Sometimes you go 20 or 25 minutes. But I always felt like if I took story time like 25, 30 minutes, that I was doing something wrong. I wish I could take that back. I really wish, Paul, that we'd had 45 minutes of story time. For grade 5 and 6, it would have been appropriate. Maybe not every day, but some days it would have been. But I had this idea that we're doing CLE curriculum. It was individualized. You would do 15 pages a day, 12 on Friday. And if you did that, faithfully every day, you could get all your books done in a year. And if you do 45 minutes of story time, it's going to be hard for some people to get their 15 pages done. So we're not going to do 45 minutes of story time. Children always want more recess. As teachers, we think, well, no. Recess is like a privilege that you get this much of. And an extra recess is like God's gift to you. Don't ever complain again. But children are like, they've got to move. They've got to wiggle. Let them out there. Get them out in the snow and in the woods. Every school, it's too late here. But I think there should be a rule that anytime you build a school, it has to have at least an acre of woods. Like there has to be a place to go out in the woods and push down dead trees or something, or build some forts, or dig around for mushrooms and don't eat them without asking permission. Like there are just good ways to learn that we should find, to be imaginative, to be creative. And why not more recess? It's a win-win for students and for teachers. We all need the exercise. We're all trying to lose weight. Childhood obesity is a problem. So run around. This is not, by the way, me saying you should build a gym. I heard that you didn't build a gym yet, and you might someday. And if you do, it's fine. And gyms are good, but just be aware that gyms can make a school boring. Marginal weather, it's kind of sleeting a little bit. I'll just go in the gym. You don't have a gym, it's like, get your mittens on. We're going out in the sleet. And it's good. It braces you up, and it's also why I don't want a gym at Calvary Bible School. I think that would just not be good. I'm fully against it. Just be aware of rules that restrict the play of children. We have games for them. It's recess time, we're going to play soccer. Well, that's fine. It's recess time, we're going to play prisoner's base. Okay. But sometimes have recess time where they get to just do what they want. Just kind of poke around in the bushes. Children love to play in the bushes. They can play in the bushes for long. Just let them play. It's okay to let them play. I'm not talking about like so much about 7th and 8th graders anymore. But, pivoting to 7th and 8th graders, be imaginative. Find ways to get them out on the farm. Find ways to... I wish all 8th grade boys could spend 3 months at a wilderness school, and they would have to like chop firewood and build tents, and it would be January, and like we need stuff like that. How can we do that? Well, it takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of resources. It's not efficient. That's true. I mean, I can say this because I'm not on a school board, but still, just imagine it. Just imagine it, and then maybe there'll be something smaller that will get us toward that kind of thinking about education. I need to stop, and I will, but just consider the ways that we can expand the joy of being a child. Consider the arts. There's limits to how much arts can do in a school, but let there be more music. Let there be more drawing. Let them do painting where they have to wear big aprons because otherwise their clothes are going to get messy. Maybe they should have a messy clothes day where you know it ahead of time and they can splash things around. Because our education, we tend towards standardization and conformity instead of personalizing education. And also the Enlightenment principles. In the Enlightenment in the West, things went to our head. We thought that ideas are the important thing. And the arts pull us back. They ground us into that feeling matters as well. It's not just the thinking that matters, but the feeling that matters. This is important stuff. Humans are different from other created things. We have the power of imagination. Keep the arts in your education. This is a prime way that we negotiate our own understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Arts can be at the center of this. If your school marginalizes the arts, you're not fully doing education. We are not mechanisms, we are organisms. Schools are organisms, humans are organisms. If you create certain cultures, people will flourish. If you create other kinds of cultures, people will feel pushed down. They may pull away. And so we conclude. Great education requires great teaching, but great teaching comes from teachers who are spirit-filled, who trust the guidance of God to direct us. And we come back to parents again, and a church as a culture. We need wisdom. We need God's hand upon the work that we do. And so tonight I'm going to close with we circle back to wisdom. I want to present an image that comes from the philosopher and poet Khalil Gibran. He lived in the turn of the 20th century. And I want to be clear about this, I appreciate the image in Psalms about children as arrows in the hand of a mighty man. That's a good image to have. But there's another way of thinking about children as arrows, and that is to think of yourself, a person of influence, a parent, a teacher, not so much as a mighty hunter who can just send your children wherever you want them to go. Because is that really how it works? Have you found that to be your experience, that you can take your children and you're like, I want you to go over there. And they're like, sure, great, here I go. Nope, I want you over there. A lot of this is out of our control. But in whose control is it? Consider yourself to be the bow. Your children are the arrows, and you are the bow, and God is the archer. And it hurts to be a bow, because if there's one thing that happens to a bow a lot, it's that it gets bent. Khalil Gibran writes, "You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so loves he also the bow that is stable. That's my prayer for you as a congregation, as a community, as a school. God is calling you to be the bow that is stable, to be the one that God holds. And he bends you, and he aims, and he sends your children out. And you won't always know why or where or how. Your children have dreams. They will live in a future where you will likely not exist. You will be gone. Let your bending in his hand be for gladness. For as he loves the arrow that flies, he loves the bow that is stable. I invite you to stand, and we'll close with prayer.